Dragon Ball and RPGs go hand in hand. Goku's journey to grow stronger, learning new techniques, unlocking new transformations to beat tougher enemies as his journey progresses, matches the RPG genre like few other anime IPs do. And yet, out of the many RPGs that we got for Dragon Ball in the past, one of them seems to stand out above the rest. The Legacy of Goku series for the Game Boy Advance. I'm on a mission to play every Dragon Ball game to completion and rank them from the best to the worst. And if that sounds interesting to you, this is episode 3 of the ranking of Dragon Ball games. This video is brought to you by Sakurako and Tokyo Treat. After filling myself up with their Christmas boxes, the savory chili arari with peanuts that even my dog was curious about, and the sweet caramel pokey, I am so ready for New Year's. With Tokyo Treat, you'll get up to 20 of the latest, most exclusive limited editions that are only available in Japan for a limited time. This month's Tokyo Treat is snacking New Year with sweets such as strawberry chocolate cake Kit Kats, a good luck taiyaki, and Anya candy. And with Sakurako, you'll receive 20 traditional and authentic artisan Japanese snacks, including Japanese teas and one special Japanese tableware every month. Sakurako's theme is New Year's in Niigata, which has some cute rabbit-themed sweets and of course, fortune cookies. Each box comes with a booklet guide full of information on what all the snacks are, where they come from, and a little background on what you will be eating. So whether you prefer tradition with Sakurako or the limited editions with Tokyo Treat, we've got you covered. I'll leave a link to both boxes down below, and whichever one you prefer, you can enter code Globku at checkout to get $5 off your first box. Plus, Sakurako is giving away free tickets for a trip to Japan, and you could win them if you subscribe before the end of January. Thank you, Sakurako and Tokyo Treat, for sponsoring this video. Legacy of Goku is a series of top-down RPGs where you play as Goku and friends going through the Dragon Ball story. In the first game, you go up against Frieza, the second game takes you through Cell, and the third game wraps up Dragon Ball Z with the Buu Saga. All three games share the same basic controls. You have a button to punch, a button to throw special moves, a button to change what your special move is, and one more button that has changed over the course of the series. Now, this series starts really rough. For as beloved of a series as this is, I thought it would be good from the start. I was sorely mistaken. Turns out, Legacy of Goku 2 is the one that people remember the most fondly, and there's somewhat of a split opinion when it comes to the third game, Buu's Fury. Having now finished all three of them, let's start from the beginning. This game is really rough. You can only play as Goku through the entire game, which I'm okay with, but everything feels like it was rushed. Starting with the graphics and enemy design. I'm not even talking about the pixelated look of the Game Boy Advance, that is what I expected. But the very first enemy you encounter are these snakes, and they're really tough to see when they're just crawling on this road of the same color. I do like the occasionally hand-drawn background, or the anime look of King Gyema, for instance. I think that's a mix that works really well, and they never did it again for the entire series, which is a shame. Gameplay-wise, even walking around is a pain, mostly because you cannot walk diagonally. You can only walk in 4 directions, and a lot of these paths seem to have been built for diagonals. So it's just super awkward to walk around as you bump into every wall the level has. In this game, you can also fly for a very limited time. You have to catch one of these flight orbs to recharge your flight meter, but even then it wasn't obvious when you could fly over objects or not. And again, I think that's because of the graphics and design for the most part. Combat in this one is very straightforward. You can walk up to enemies and punch them, though hitting an enemy is something that takes some getting used to, as you have to be perfectly lined up with them or extremely close. And also, this game is very brutal. You take a lot of damage from a single hit from an enemy, and there aren't a lot of ways to heal up. At least not at first, until you stock up on senzu beans or other healing items. So the safe strategy is to keep enemies from a distance and just throw ki blasts, or charge ki blasts if you have the time to do it. Your ki regenerates automatically, so while you're waiting, you're just running away and try not to get hit, so you can go back to throwing ki blasts, and that makes it extremely dull. In between missions, you'll find many side quests. They're mostly optional, but you kind of want to do them because they give you experience. And as I said before, this game is brutal, so you definitely want to level up every chance you get. But they also feel super random with no relation to the current events. Goku will go around finding a dinosaur egg while his son has been kidnapped by Raditz. Just feels like these quests could have waited until tomorrow because the son is about to get killed by his weird alien uncle that just showed up. And very often these quests give you very little direction. This old man, for instance, he just tells you that there are several disturbances in the forest, and you cannot proceed until you quiet the forest down. What you have to do, actually, is to find his cat. Well, how was I supposed to know that? The old man does teach you Solar Flare, which is a special move that stuns the opponent, so you can then move in and punch them 2 or 3 times safely, and that makes fights go so much faster. It's not just the side missions that are random, though. Everyone who has finished this game knows the pain of going through the final Namek Maze, a dungeon where you'll find several colored platforms, each one teleporting you to a different place. There's absolutely no logic or hint as to what the correct color sequence is, and many of these paths just take you back to the start. It's a massive trial and error endeavor where to find the correct way, you'll have to go through several secret paths that just look like walls. It was quite a mess of a game, and it was pretty short too. You can finish it in about 3 hours, even with a side quest. But to understand why this was the case, here's a quote from the developer's official Facebook page. "We developed the Legacy of Goku 1 as an indie game without any funding. They didn't give us a contract until the game was almost finished. Then when it sold well, we got contracts immediately for Legacy of Goku 2. Well, honestly, it shows, and it's a shame that this game came out the way it did, but at least things worked out for the better in the end. There are very few redeeming qualities or things I'd like to see carried over into a sequel, except for maybe some of those hand-drawn backgrounds. I quite like the style of those. But when people go back and play through the Legacy of Goku series, they tend to skip this one, and for very good reason. Ranking-wise, this kinda reminds me of the first Super Butoden, which is technically a fighting game, just not a very good one. Very bare bones, feels incredibly rushed too, so I'll probably rank this in the same place because it feels the same to me, just in a different genre. And for this episode, we're gonna mark these games with Piccolo, because nothing says RPG like training and leveling up with Gohan's real dad. From one of the worst RPGs that I've ever played to one of the best in the entire Game Boy Advance platform. Legacy of Goku 2 holds up extremely well if you ever want to go back to it or even play it for the first time. Even nowadays, it's such a good game. There's no flight mechanic this time around, but instead you can sprint by double tapping a direction, which is really good for exploration and also very funny when you run headfirst into a wall. The biggest improvement for me in this game is that you can actually walk diagonally. Diagonals unlocked! Who knew this would make such a big difference? Exploring actually feels nice, and it made combat feel better too. This game revamped the menus, giving us a lot of things that were pretty basic for RPGs. Things like a quest log, a map, health bars on a boss fight so you don't have to guess how far away from finishing a fight you are. And this time there's even an overworld where you can fly around from place to place. Sometimes because the story wants you to do it, other times because you're taking breaks. You're exploring, you're leveling up, or you're finding secrets, because there's actually secrets to find in this game and all of them have meaningful rewards. I get that a lot of this sounds basic, but coming from the first Legacy of Goku, oh my god, give me all the basic stuff. It was missing so much of it. But also, I think they went above and beyond on some of these things, like the collectibles. For instance, the most basic ones are these golden capsules. Once you find all 25 of them, you'll see areas that you haven't explored grayed out on your map instead of not seeing them at all. And you just unlock that permanently for the entire game. If you find all of the missing Namekians, you can actually go to Namek and fight against a secret boss, which is cooler. And I guess he's not that secret anymore. And what I love the most about this is that a lot of these quests have this semi-open structure. You might bump into some of these quests by accident before it's time to actually do them, but the game will let you complete them and then you'll just have the reward or the item that you need to progress at a later point. It's so good and really well built, it feels like you can randomly bump into something you weren't supposed to, but the game has accounted for that and will reward you for exploring that much. And how could I forget, you can now play as different characters: Goku, Gohan, Piccolo, Trunks, and Vegeta. All of them behave the same except they have different special moves and also a different strong attack, which is a new feature. When you hold down the attack button, your character will flash white and unleash a stronger attack. And they're different depending on the character you're playing as, and these slight differences are enough to change how you approach combat with each different character. And you're gonna want to play with all of them, not only because the story demands it, but the world is built for you to switch characters constantly. You have these doors that can only be opened by one of the characters once they reach a certain level. Each character has a high level door to break down where they can defeat a boss and get a statue of themselves, all to unlock a secret character, Hercule. I did it again. It's a bit grindy to open all of these doors, but totally optional, and the reward is really cool. Hercule is probably the strongest character in the game, which is funny. He deals very low damage, but he can stun all the enemies on screen by just posing. This is probably one of the best Dragon Ball games that will rank for a while. It's probably one of the best Dragon Ball games of all time. It rewards you so much for exploring, but it can also be a fun experience if you're just rushing through the story. It's so good that the only limitations, the only cons I can think of, are imposed by the platform itself. It'd be nice to have voice acting, better quality cutscenes, a bigger moveset for each character, but that's perhaps unfair criticism, since they have done so much with what they had available. Nevertheless, we will be ranking this against some console games in the future, so we need to keep that in mind. That said, as far as I'm concerned, Legacy of Goku 2 is the perfect game for the platform it was released on. Hello, do you want to lose all faith in humanity? So you remember when the developer said that the first Legacy of Goku sold well and they got contracts for the sequel immediately? That's because Legacy of Goku 1 sold 1.4 million units in North America America only. That's really good for a Game Boy Advance game. How did this masterpiece of a sequel sell though? Not even 1 million worldwide. And so for the third game, they dropped the Legacy of Goku name and simply called it Dragon Ball Z Boost Fury. Name change aside, it is a direct sequel, so a lot of the game plays the same way with a few changes. First of all, they added a block button. Whenever you level up, you can choose where to put your stats now, and you also have equipment that drops from mobs and treasure chests. When enemies drop food, it now goes to your inventory instead of you just eating it on the spot, which gave you an abundance of healing items. And if you're out in the overworld, you can now fly up and down, which doesn't have a big impact on gameplay, except there are now some random encounters where you run into an airship or a submarine full of thieves. They did remove the little pixels marking locations in the overworld, so it became a bit harder to navigate. Now, I don't think any of these changes make the game better, but some of them do give you some extra options. One change that I did like is the new fusion transformation, which came in real handy. First of all, you have to complete a quick time event, and if you fail, you get one of the failed fusions. You can't play with them, it's just a little gag. But using a fusion means you're leveling up 2 characters at once, and in an RPG like this, it makes the grind go by so much faster. But why is this game more polarizing? Why isn't it just universally loved like Legacy of Goku 2? Well, the biggest criticism is that this game is too easy, which is true, but I think the main problem is actually pacing. The game is definitely capable of difficult boss fights. While you'll cruise through most of the game killing everyone in 1 or 2 punches, there are boss fights where you'll be eating most of your inventory just to stay alive. In my opinion, the reason why this game feels so easy is because of the leveled gates. Just like in Legacy of Goku 2, sometimes there will be a level requirement gate for you to progress the story. And while in the previous game, you would sometimes be 2 or 3 levels below it, in this game I often ran into these doors and I was 20 levels below the requirement. Leveling up is much faster though. Every 3 or so enemies you're leveling up. But once you hit that level requirement and you get past that door, you're still killing everyone in 1 or 2 hits. It's like the game asked you to be over leveled in order to progress. The pacing is off. This makes combat a lot less engaging. It becomes easier to just turn your brain off, run into an enemy and punch them, especially because special moves feel extremely weak in this game. And that just doesn't feel right when Dragon Ball's most iconic moves deal less damage than a simple punch. And that's an even bigger bummer when they made a lot of unique specials for this game specifically. You've got Gotank's volleyball attack, which traps an opponent in a volleyball. Vegeta's Big Bang attack is a slow-moving projectile that is massive if you can charge it for long enough. Gogeta has this Dragon Punch that is absolutely devastating, but all of them are weaker than your normal attacks that don't even cost meter. Speaking of Gogeta, this game does a wonderful job of integrating the Janemba movie into the main plot, even if that is the only movie plot that is covered in the entire game. Broly does a little cameo, but it's so random, it comes out of absolutely nowhere, and then you never see him again. The game still has some very good mission variety. It has very good dungeons, even better than Legacy of Goku 2's dungeons. And you still have collectibles that fill up this museum, and once you complete the collection, you unlock Gogeta as a playable character outside the story. But everything just feels like it's undermined by how strong you are at any given point in the game, making the experience feel a bit bland. Also, they added a multiplayer mode. You could link up 2 Game Boys together and just fight against each other. I actually held a tournament for this, and it was pretty funny, but it is not a good multiplayer game at all. Still, it's there, it's completely optional, so I don't think it harms the game in any way, but it also doesn't make it any better. It's a really disappointing game if you put it next to its predecessor, but it's still doing a lot of the things that made Legacy of Goku 2 good. It starts from a good place, so it's not a bad game in the slightest. It is much harder to recommend as the game gets in its own way a lot by getting your progress when it didn't need to, and the result is you becoming overpowered all the time. But in a void, I still think the game is good, so I'm placing it at B. And that's another episode of the ranking of Dragon Ball games. Welcome to 2023. Is this the year when we'll finish this series? Probably not. But here's the previous episode where we rank the old Butoden games in case you missed it. Thanks for watching. Bye.